Morning. As Ian said, I am passionate about it. I guess I'm as passionate about leadership as Steve Jobs was passionate about having the most incredible, beautiful product that did something that nothing else did. We've listened for 2.5 days about e-commerce and many other things. I often think of the advertising genius David Ogilvy, who said his inventory went up in the morning and down at night. And obviously he was talking about his people. And I find it, not disturbing, but other than Michael's last bullet point this morning and Mike Ullman's few comments at the very end of yesterday, really is no conversation about people. The word goes up there, but what do we mean by that? And I am passionate about it because I think that that is the role of everyone in this room. Everyone's role in this room may not be e-commerce. Everyone's role in this room may not be building a brick and mortar store. Everyone's role in this room may not be logistics. But everyone's role in Bloomingdale's was to be a leader. So the question becomes, what's leadership? Peter Drucker, the great marketing genius, said that leadership is lifting an organization's vision to higher heights and the raising of their performance to a higher standard. So what I thought I would like to do this morning is, everyone has things that they collect. Some people collect Limoges boxes, some people collect baccarat, some people collect baseball cards in America, or whatever it may be. Well, through the years, I've been a voracious collector of articles and books on leadership, because I believe at the end of the day, that's all it's about. That's all anyone's going to remember you did. I've always had this belief that no one remembers the numbers. Yes, we need the numbers for the day, we need the numbers for the quarter, we need numbers, but no one remembers the numbers after that. But what they remember is, who gave me an opportunity to be more than I thought I could be. So I've been a collector of that. What I'd like to do in the next 25, 30 minutes is I selected out of the, hundreds of articles and quotes and books that I have, a couple of different articles. And I'd like to take a few excerpts from those and talk about it. I left a copy of these articles with Ian so that if it goes up on the site and someone wants to look at them, feel free. So we start with leadership. When I go to the Columbia Business School twice a year, when I was at Harvard in the executive program, in the business school this past spring, I always ask the question, well, what's the most important characteristic of leadership? The hands go up and they say, passion, enthusiasm, energy, vision, perseverance. Very, very rarely, once, two years ago at Columbia, a hand went up and gave the answer I was looking for, and the answer was trust. Because my argument would be, if someone has great vision but you don't trust them, are they going to be a great leader? If they have great energy, they're a great strategic thinker, but you don't trust them, can they be a great leader? I don't think so. But I think that some of the definitions of a great leader that I've put down is, how does one define and live the balance between hope and reality? And how does one provide aspiration and visionary stretch while managing reality into the best opportunity? That, I think, is what makes great leaders. The most incredible article or one-pager I ever saw in leadership, I never knew where it came from because there was nothing on the bottom when I saw it. And about 2 years ago, in one of the talks, someone came running out of the business school at Columbia when the session was over and said, I found it. And it was in a training manual of IBM in 1950. And what did it say? And I want to read it. That's the only thing I'll try to read today. It said, leadership. Leadership is an invisible strand as mysterious as it's powerful. It pulls and it bonds. It's a catalyst that creates unity out of disorder, yet it defies definition. No combination of talents can guarantee it. No process of training can create it where the spark does not exist. The qualities of leadership are universal. The found and the rich and the poor, the humble and the proud, the common man and the brilliant thinker. They're qualities that suggest paradox rather than pattern. But wherever they're found, leadership makes things happen. The most precious and intangible quality of leadership is trust. The confidence that the one who leads will act in the best interest of those who follow. The assurance that he or she will serve the group without sacrificing the rights of the individual. In its highest sense, leadership is integrity. This command by conscience that asserts itself more by commitment and example than by directive. Integrity recognizes external obligations, but it heeds the quiet voice within rather than the clamor without. and leadership's imperative sense of rightness, knowing when to advance, when to pause, when to criticize, when to praise, how to encourage others to excel. From the leader's reserves of energy and optimism, his followers or her followers will draw strength. In his or her determination, self-confidence, they find inspiration. Common logic would say, maybe I should sit down right now, because the fact is, I don't know how you build anything more upon that. I always felt so strongly about that on the first fiscal day of every new year at Bloomingdale's, I sent that out with one other article that I'll refer to in a few minutes. I sent it out because I thought it was the most important thing to continue to remember that that's the role of every executive or every person in Bloomingdale's. Because based on that definition, a sales associate is a leader. Because if the basic element is trust, I want my customer to trust me. I've always been a great believer that stories sort of tell things. And one of the stories are that stories take complicated things and make them sound simple. Many years ago, about 1992, I saw an article in the Harvard Business Review called Parables of Leadership. I said, Parables of Leadership. And one was written by a professor at Harvard and one by a professor here at Fontainebleau. But they were stories that one of them had heard growing up in the Gyeong province of Korea, and tried to relate it to what was leadership about. And let me just talk about a couple of them. One was the sounds of the forest. And there was the man went to the forest, and the master said, well, go to the forest and maybe become enlightened. I'm obviously paraphrasing it. And he goes to the forest. He says, what do you hear in the forest? Well, he came back. He said, well, I heard a little rustling. I heard the leaves. I heard a few animals. Well, that's all you heard? And the story goes on. Well, go back. Listen better. He goes back and spent many hours underneath or days underneath the tree. And all of a sudden, he heard different things. So let me just read the paragraph. So when Prince Tai returned to the temple, the master asked him what he had heard. Master responded, the prince reverently, when I listened more closely, I could hear the unheard. The sound of flowers opening, the sound of the sun warming the earth, the sound of grass drinking the morning dew. The master nodded approvingly. To hear the unheard, remarked Panku, is necessary discipline to be a good ruler. For only when a ruler has listened closely to people's hearts, hearing their feelings uncommunicated, pains unexpressed, and complaints not spoken of, can he hope to inspire the confidence of his people and understand when something is wrong and meet the true needs of the citizens. The demise of states come when leaders listen only to superficial words and don't penetrate deeply in the souls of the people and hear their true opinions and feelings and thoughts. And so many times, I know with my kids, 16-year-old, say to them, what's wrong? Nothing. Imagine what the nothing would sound like if something was really wrong. How many times have things really bothered us, but we don't want to talk about it? But I think the role of a great leader is, how do you hear that unspoken? How do you hear the fact that many years ago, one of our highest potential people at Bloomingdale's came in, HR called me and said someone resigned. I said, where's she going? Nowhere. She doesn't have a job. No. Why is she leaving? We don't know. What are the problems? There are none. Well, fast forward that. She comes up, cries for 15 minutes. I didn't say a word. I go back to HR. Something's wrong. Well, what was wrong was she had a buyer that she had to terminate, had agreed to terminate. But she was a wonderful kid, but just couldn't do that job. We found another job for her. So when the next morning when the divisional came up, I said, what if we move Jennifer to here? She says, I'm okay with that. Actually, she didn't say that. She got up, she gave me a hug and a kiss and went back to her office. We heard the unspoken. She was willing to leave her job because she couldn't do something that she knew she had to do. But we heard the unspoken. I think that what a great leader is a great leader has to hear that unspoken. And that's what these parables are about. I'm not going to go through them in the interest of time, but one of the other parables is the wisdom of the mountain. You know, the comments, you go up to a mountain, what do you see at 10,000 feet? Well, as you come down that mountain, you see different things at 5,000 feet. 2,000 feet, you might see those specks that were at 10,000 feet. Now you see them at 2,000 feet or 1,500. Well, those are cows. 1,000 feet, they're flowers. So this is a parable, and I think it's an important lesson for leaders. It's a parable, I'll just talk about the end, is the road to enlightenment, because went up to the top of the mountain to find enlightenment. The road to enlightenment is like the journey down the mountain. It comes to those who realize that what one sees at the top of the mountain is not what one sees at the bottom. Without this wisdom, we close our minds to all we cannot view from our position and so limit our capacity to grow and improve. But with this wisdom, there comes an awakening. We realize that alone only one sees so much, which in truth is not much at all. This is the wisdom that opens our minds to improvement, knocks down prejudices, and teaches us to respect what is first we cannot view. Never forget the last lesson. What cannot be seen from one part of the mountain can be seen from another part. How many meetings do we all have when we're stuck on one situation? We're only looking at the situation from one point of view. How do we challenge the comfortableness and say, how do we look at it differently? I've always appointed a devil's advocate in every meeting in the 3 companies that I led. I've always believed that a devil's advocate is vitally important, to challenge what everyone thinks they see. Do they really seen the whole thing? You say, well, what does that have to do with leadership? I think what it has to do with leadership is how do we stretch people? That's our role. Our role is teachers. I understand our role is e-commerce. I understood that at Bloomingdale's. I understood I had to make an EBIT. I understood all that. But the fact of the matter is, the real role is we have to leave ourselves as leaders. And the last one I want to talk about, because I think it is about leadership, and it's about what all of us have to do in building teams, is really the story about what's called the wheel and the light. And put this up online if you want. And really it was a story about what happened in the 3rd century in China and the change of one of the dynasties. And there was a fellow became the emperor, Li Bang. But Li Bang people couldn't understand. Why was Li Bang the emperor? Because his diplomat was more important. His head of logistics was more important. His head general was more important. More important that they were the very best of what they did. But no one could understand it until the master said, he smiled and said, well, what determines the strength of a wheel in carrying a chariot forward? After a moment of reflection, his disciples responded, well, is it not the sturdiness of the spokesmaster? But then why is it, he rejoined, that 2 wheels made of identical spokes differ in strength? After the moment, the master continued, see beyond what is seen. Never forget that a wheel is made not only of spokes, but of the space between the spokes. Sturdy spokes, poorly placed, make a weak wheel. Whether their full potential is realized depends on the harmony between them. The essence of wheel making lies in the craftsman's ability to conceive and create the space that holds the balance and balances the spokes within the wheel. Now, who's the craftsman here? A glimmer of moonlight was visible behind the door. Silence reigned until one discipline said, but master, how does a craftsman secure the harmony between the spokes? Think of sunlight, replied the master. The sun nurtures and vitalizes the trees and the flowers. It does so by giving away its own light. But in the end, what direction do they all grow? So it true of the master craftsman like Li Bang. After placing individuals in positions that fully realize their potential, he secures harmony among them by giving them all the credit for their distinctive achievements. And in the end, as the trees and the flowers grow towards the giver, the sun, individuals grow towards Li Bang with devotion. I've always believed, even though there are a lot of other great retailers in New York or in the United States, I always believed that Bloomingdale's maybe never had the best person in any one position, but I always believed that it had the best team. There's no I in team, as someone said yesterday or the day before. But it was that team and maybe those spokes together. And isn't that what all our jobs is about? How do we create the best teams? Because no matter how brilliant Steve Jobs was, he didn't do it by himself. Just finished reading a book, Creativity, Inc., which is the story of Pixar. Yes, he had great creativity, but if it wasn't for the other 2 fellas, it never would have been as what it was. It was that team. The other article I sent out on the first Monday of every new fiscal year was an article that I've given to every business school class I've talked to or anyone. And it's an article by John Gardner. It's an article called Personal Renewal. John Gardner was the founder of Common Cause. John Gardner was the head of the Carnegie Foundation. John Gardner was the Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare under President Kennedy. And he wrote an article, or he gave a speech at McKinsey in Arizona in 1990, which I always kept. And it's an article about personal renewal. The gist of the article really is, and it's really the most important article anyone can read on leadership, but it's really about life. And the article really talks about what's your personal renewal. I had the same title for 22 and a half years at Bloomingdale's. Never had the same job one year the next. None of us should have the same job one year the next. If we do, something's wrong. But John Gardner talks about life. He talks about how he's at 77, still learning, starting a new job. It's an article that talks about how life is this endless unfolding. Life is not about a mountain that has a summit, and life isn't about a riddle that has an answer. But it's this endless process of self-discovery. Now, maybe because I'm a son of a professor from MIT, I really understood watching my father all those years, being a teacher, not just in a classroom, but a teacher in helping students get into medical school or whatever else was there. And by osmosis, not even knowing what it was as a young kid, I saw this person that was a teacher, and I said, well, I'm never going to be a professor. Not smart enough for that. But aren't we all teachers? On the first day that every new associate executive comes to Bloomingdale's on the training squad, they've heard the same message from me for 22 and a half years. I'm sure they're going to hear the same one from Tony Spring now. May change it a word here or a word there. And that is, I passionately believed, the education, their education did not stop when they got their degree at college. Their education didn't stop when they got that piece of parchment from Brown or Penn or Harvard or Michigan or George Washington, wherever it was. But one form of their education stopped, another one had to start at Bloomingdale's. It had to start at Bloomingdale's because I really believed that I saw something over 30 years ago, and in 3 CEO jobs or 2 CEO jobs since that time, I really have tried to live it. Someone once asked Jack Welch, what are you responsible for? Obviously, he's responsible for the whole company. Well, there are only 2 things that I don't delegate. One was capital. I'm in charge of capital. And 2, I'm in charge of human capital. At the end of the day, at Bloomingdale's, those are 2 things I was in charge of. Did I understand every store opening? Yes. Did I get involved in every little detail, too many details? Yes, that's what, unfortunately, you do. But the fact of the matter was the 2 things that I never parceled out, capital and human capital. Because the fact of the matter is, the company's only as strong as the human capital. You know, we sell creme de la mer at Bloomingdale's, so does in Saks, so does in Bergdorf's. You know, 90% of the merchandise, 95% of the merchandise in Bloomingdale's 59th Street you can find in 10 city blocks. So what's the difference? How do you make something happen? Does it come back to the spokes in the wheel? Yes. Does it come back to people having undue devotion and loyalty? Yes. Does it come back to people really believing that they work for the best? Whether you do or you don't, you try to be the best? Yes. But what John Gardner talks about is this endless process of self-discovery. 2008, well, certainly in the United States, the retail world came to a screeching 22% drop or thereabouts after the Lehman crisis. Bloomingdale's, like everyone else, tried to figure out how we're going to manage our business. So we took 3 days. The exec committee went through every little thing, looked at every little budget. But I started the meeting off by saying one thing. I said, every solitary thing is open for discussion. But just remember, it's a long game. We're going to come out of this, but we're not going to kill ourselves to come out of it, because if we kill ourselves, we don't come out of it. But what do we do prudently? But there's one line we don't touch. So take 20% of whatever that budget is and find it elsewhere. But we're not touching the education line. And what's the education line? That was the new trainee programs, 3 a year, 25 people a program. That was all the leadership seminars that we ran during the course of the year. That was every one of our educational programs. We can change them. You can't stop education because the business is tough. Go figure some other things, but don't touch that. You can't stop the growth of your people. That's what we're there for. And the last thing I'll just mention is something that happened in a serendipitous way 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I bumped into a book called Mandela's Way. My son was looking at the books in bought a bookstore in Manhattan, and I see this book, and I saw a blurb about it, and I picked it up. It's a small book. It was written by Rick Stengel. Rick Stengel was, until recently, the chief editor of Time Inc. But Rick Stengel was also the person that helped Nelson Mandela write Long Walk to Freedom, his autobiography. So what Rick Stengel did was took a book and called it 15 Lessons of Life, Love, and Courage. It's really a book of life. And it became like, I don't know how it became this force in Bloomingdale's. Because first I bought one copy myself. I read it that night. It's very short. Everyone can read it by the time they get home on a plane ride. And the fact of the matter was, I was so taken by it, I went back and bought another one for my HR guy and two for two people in St. Louis that work with a company called Psychological Associates that worked with us on team building and did our testing at certain levels. And here's Bob Lefton, who's written 9 books on leadership, saying it's the best book he ever read. The fact of the matter was, it was about teaching about the whole person. It wasn't really a book about leadership, it's a book about life. Make a long story short, over the last 3 years, we've bought 4,500 copies at Bloomingdale's. Every executive has one. Every executive read one. Never sent a note out to read it. Never sent a message out from HR, ooh, Mike would like you to read this book. Salespeople say, my manager has this book, Mr. Gould, why can't I get one? I says, yes, you can. I've given this book to CEOs of Fortune 500s. I've given it to university professors. Because it's a book that has really changed our management style. When I asked the psychologist, why is this book so powerful? What moved this book? Why has this book moved our people? We had weekly meetings. Our executive committee meeting, 11 people on Monday, first 45 minutes, one person took each one of the chapters. Talked about it for 45 minutes. It changed us. The chapters are things like the first chapter is courage is not the absence of fear. Be measured, lead from the front, lead from the back. What are your core values? See the good in others, know your enemy. Have a garden. Mandela's garden. Have a garden, something else beside your work. It's a long game. It's always both. And a few other chapters. So when I asked the psychologist why, what's moved everyone, it became part of our lexicon. The comment was, the people are starved for spiritual, emotional, and philosophical guidance. People want that connection. And so it's not part of my conversation, but I'm a great believer, the comment was just made, that brick and mortar has been around for centuries. I'm a great believer, yes, the internet is an enormous opportunity going forward. And you have to have both. But I'm also a believer that since the time of the Greeks, if not before, people are going to go in the marketplaces. Just to buy something was part of that a social activity. Part of that's a connection. And so this book, which changed people's lives at Bloomingdale's, and the leadership factors that were learned there are really hard to imagine. And I think that there was also an article that I've left in the deck for Ian, a one-pager written by a professor at business school at Harvard a year ago, January, on the lessons. It's called Lincoln's School of Management. And I believe, and next time I want to talk to Rick Stengel, I'm going to ask him, whether Mandela became a student of Lincoln. Because the fact of the matter is, here is Lincoln so many years before. Died 150 years before Mandela. But the lessons are similar. Look at situations always from one viewpoint. The business of being so measured. The thing about the core value. You talk about what are the core values. The core value of Mandela, what was the core value of Mandela? The core value of Mandela was not the liberation. What was the core value? The core value was liberation. Struggle was not simply so much about the liberating the blacks from bondage in South Africa, but it was about liberating whites from their fear. And here you had Lincoln 150 years before, a white man that people said, well, he was against slavery, yes, but that was not his core value. His core value is the reunification of the country. Yes, he hoped to get abolishment of slavery, but that wasn't the core value. And that one of the things that comes across in this book and in the article about Lincoln is, do we all have a core value? And do we never deviate from that core value? That's being a great leader. So the things about the willingness to listen, sharing credit, inclusion of rivals, the need to be balanced and controlled, the ability of leaders to be not only lead, but to be seen to lead. Both of them. Both Lincoln and Mandela had this passion about you had to be seen to lead. You couldn't just lead. Could you be seen to lead? And leadership is about moving in a certain direction, usually changing the direction of thinking and their actions. The way to do that is by empowering and pushing others more forward ahead of you. And so I really do believe that at the end of the day, as I've always said, no one remembers the numbers. What do people remember? Yesterday, a young fellow came up to me, I say this somewhat sheepishly, and said, I remembered your talk 4 years ago. I said, really? I said, I didn't know what the heck I said, but at this meeting, I was in Berlin, I guess, and he said, I remember your talk, and it really affected me, and it changed me, changed my life. I said, what was it? He said, you talked about passion of product, but you couldn't be a great leader if you didn't have passion for what you did and compassion for people. So I guess he didn't remember my numbers, but he remembered a comment. And so I don't believe people remember numbers. I believe people remember what you did for them. I think everyone has an opportunity. Ordinary people do have an opportunity to be extraordinary. Why at home do we have unconditional love? For our kids. We all have unconditional love, almost no matter what they do. Well, maybe you don't have to have unconditional love at work. Do we have unconditional support? Do you have unconditional ability to give people the belief in themselves that they can do anything? Someone once said it's a fine thing to have ability, but the ability to discover ability in others is the true test. Isn't that what we're here for? So really, I would close with the comments of the poetess Maya Angelou, because I think she really said it best. She said, people may forget what you said, and people may forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Those people, and all of us, who can make our people feel that special, end up with a special organization, with a special mission, and with people that feel enriched. Thanks, and have a great day.